Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Thursday. It's the day of our ThinkTech reunion, our ThinkTech United, which is going to take place in a few hours at 5 p.m. Honolulu time. We're going to have our reunion, and we're going to have a fabulous gathering in the YWCA Laniakea on Richard Street in downtown Honolulu. We're going to have a lot of people coming, more than I expected. And, furthermore, as you can see on the screen, Robbie Am is going to be there talking about leadership, and he is an expert in leadership, and his expertise undoubtedly will wrap around questions having to do with the blockbuster news about NextEra buying Hawaiian Electric. That ought to be a really interesting discussion, on point in terms of current events. Anyway, for the show today, we actually are going to talk to a host, and he is in Philadelphia, and he is Avrum Goodblatt. And he is with StratoCore and other companies, and he is here to tell us, by way of Philadelphia, what's going on in social media and how ThinkTech and other companies similarly situated can use social media to help them expand, get through, be better than they were. Avrum, thank you for joining us. It's great to talk to you, even on Skype.
Thank you. I really appreciate being able to talk to you as well. As you can see, I put on one of my more sedate Hawaiian shirts to honor your presence.
Thank you.
Even though it's very cold outside here, I have my sweater just in case.
I would advise you then to hide the hens and get to Maui as soon as you possibly can, Avrum.
Yes, and my whole family is working in that direction. We're hoping in June to be on island somewhere.
Oh, good. So tell us a little about what you do in computers, and what you do in social media.
Okay. The work that I'm doing right now is with StratoCore, is related to helping develop and support systems that allow researchers to manage large-scale, what they call core facilities.
How do you spell StratoCore?
Core facilities are those facilities shared by the different investigators, researchers, where they do work on a case-by-case basis or provide instruments. These days, a microscope can cost $1 million, and not everybody's going to buy one. The core facilities do things like maintain the instruments properly and teach people how to use them. Also, they might do very sophisticated types of genomic analysis that can't be done by someone within their lab.
Mm-hmm. So this is for medical research.
I'm sorry?
Medical research.
What is the research?
Your work is in medical research?
These instruments are usually used by biomedical researchers, but sometimes also by chemistry and engineering as well. The bulk of the clients are specifically in biomedical research.
Okay. And so what is your expertise in this?
Well, my expertise goes back much further. I pioneered community use of the internet back in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And some friends of, even before the internet, some people with similar interest in I put together an association. I was one of the members. I wasn't one of the initiators, called the Electronic Networking Association. And back then, we used to talk about the problems in getting good online forums that actually were of value. And we felt that there was a lot of wasted information, just people talking at each other. And surprise, surprise, I called up my old colleague from those ENA days, and she said it hasn't changed, it's gotten worse. That the signal-to-noise ratio in all these forums and social media is much too low. Too much, not enough signal, too much noise.
You mean today?
Today, right today. And so back then, we used to talk about how do we deal with this issue, and that hopefully it'll be taken care of in the future, and the issues are still here. You could call it the human side of computing.
Well, it certainly sounds to me like the human side. I mean, we can make technology, but we're still mammals. And it sounds like the same problem that existed in the 90s still exists. So, and the solution, I would imagine, you can agree or disagree, The solution is not in the stars, it's in ourselves. The solution is not in the technology, it's in the way we approach it. And I think people don't really get it when it comes to meetings, whether they be in person or online.
I would say I would agree with you 80%.
Okay.
The only reason I don't agree with you 100% is many of the tools that are developed for human interaction on the internet are developed by people who are not necessarily great at human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the tools can make it worse. That's the 20%.
Yeah, okay. Well, now here we are, and we have, we haven't really advanced that much for one reason or another. We have the possibility of tools that will change all this, which we're not doing as well as we might. We need to change all this simply because of the volume of people online. I mean, the noise ratio and the signal ratio combined is a huge amount of data, and it's all the more important that we filter out what we really want. So what can be done about social media? What can be done to bring it to a human level, make it work for us as it has never worked before?
Well, this may sound like a very strange statement to make, but I think that Hawaii has something significant to contribute to that solution.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is people who come to Hawaii or people who stay in Hawaii value the experience of life in Hawaii. They value talk story. They value the human interconnection. They value something more than just making money. And you have to have those kind of values to know how to promote better use of information that's more useful for people. You have to put the people first. And in Hawaii, people come first, much more so perhaps than in other parts of the country.
Well, I'll agree that island life is different. In my own experiences, I was assigned for just a short while in the island, in Wake Island, during the Vietnam War. And I remember realizing and being told and it being explained to me that life on an island sociologically is very different from life on a larger island or a continent. And unless you understand that, you won't be able to cope with it. Like they always say here on Bishop Street, they say it's a small town. And they mean that in a number of ways. One is you can get to know everybody. And two is if you do something that's obnoxious, it will come back on you a lot sooner than it would in New York and Manhattan. So you can't afford to do things that are obnoxious. Anyway, so I mean, island life is different, and I grant you this is a great laboratory to learn about social media. But the question is, how would you approach it? How would you make social media work better here so that you can take those lessons and apply them elsewhere in a larger market?
I don't have all the solutions worked out. Otherwise, if I did, probably I'd be too busy to have time to talk to you.
I know you'd always talk to me, Avrum.
Yes, or anybody else. But my basic point that I'm exploring is you really need moderation and cultivation. You need people whose job it is to spend developing the connections and taking care of the information, of the archives, finding out what's in them that's of value to people and letting them know about it. This is a human task that can be aided by computers, but needs some human intervention as well. Unfortunately, in many corporate situations, the goal is to cut out the human element and try to do it automatically. That has been going on since the beginning of computers. There's a fellow in Indiana at the university there named Ensminger who published something called, I'm trying to remember the name of it, something that he titled with the words computer boys in it. I can get you the actual citation later. But the important thing that he was saying is the history of computing was the managers attempting to control the programmers, find some way to make them into something they could put into a box and control. That's why the open source movement started, is there were people doing creative things with computers that there was no space for them to do in the corporate world. And lo and behold, it's those open source things that in some ways have taken over. I mean, Linux is the best example, but there are many others.
You know, we have a fair number of events out here that ThinkTech does, and it's very interesting over the past 10 years how things have changed with regard to Q&A. Q&A and comments from the floor. And I know that's not as broad or, you know, deep a subject as you would find in, you know, in managing enterprise data, but nevertheless, the changes have been remarkable. So at first we started with microphones. And somebody could stand in the back and you give him a microphone and he could speak at you and ask a question. There were all kinds of problems with that because, you know, some people would go on and not be able to form a question. Other people, you know, would make a speech and never ask a question and so forth. So you lost control. Second way, which we evolved to, was index cards. We would have our staff walk among the tables and hand out index cards, and people would ask the people to write down questions, and they would, and that was better. Except that a lot of handwriting is illegible, and it fell on the moderator to try to read what it was and then sort them out in some logical order and figure out how to handle all the questions. Truth is, though, we got more questions that way. But recently, in the past year or so, a product was developed here at the university, which on its face seems very simple, but indeed it's very complex, and a lot of discipline has gone into it. A lot of disciplines have gone into it, all kinds of social disciplines. It's called livesift.com, and we use it. It's software as a service on the web, and it allows somebody to log in to a coded, you know, area on the web and ask questions. It's sort of in the nature of Twitter, I suppose, short questions. And the questions go to the moderator, and he can manipulate the questions and sort the questions out, and then he can put them on a screen as he likes to pose to the panelists. Well, this has actually changed everything. And, you know, you can say, well, it's a modest advance, but it's much more than that, because it has changed the way the whole meeting works. You know, it's elegant, it's a small solution with huge effect. And I looked on the mainland to see if there's anything quite like this. Answer, no. And the guys who put this together are really our heroes. And what strikes me is that somehow this relates to what you're talking about, because this changes the way people interact together in the community of a meeting. And I wonder if some small, elegant little piece like that would have similar effect in dealing with, you know, millions of messages, for example, in social media.
You know, there's a famous saying, and I wish I knew who said it first, that all politics is local.
Uh-huh. True.
And
I think it might have been Abe Lincoln.
it could have been. The thing that I learned from that is every important set of human interactions in the end is local. Meaning you're talking to people you know, where there's a backstory, there's a history, there's a context that you cannot capture just in the messages themselves. Now, nothing I'm saying is unique or revolutionary. I did not create these ideas. I did not invent them. I just read and borrowed and learned. And the point that I want to come back to is it's much easier to explain the importance of these things to someone in Hawaii than it is frequently in a lot of other places, because the necessity and the value and the enjoyment of relating to people is one of the major advantages to Hawaii. I can tell you right now, though, that I've been in Philadelphia for several years. Every time I have to call for business purposes to Hawaii, whether it be a bank or a government office, I look forward to it. It sounds very strange, because the worst office that I have to call in Hawaii, when I talk to them, it's a joy talking to them. They're still people first and dealing with business later.
And you know what I do when I talk to people on the mainland, and, you know, they help me and they're nice, I use Hawaiian words. So I'll talk to somebody who's helping me, and I'll say at the end of the conversation, mahalo, aloha.
Yeah.
They really react to that. And then I say, Avrum, we got to take a break. That's not Hawaiian, but that's just as real. So let me take 1 minute now, take a break, and we'll come back. That's Avrum Goodblatt of StratoCore in Philadelphia, joining us by Skype here on Technology Matters, and we're talking about what social media can do for ThinkTech. We'll be right back.
ThinkTech Hawaii, Hawaii's
Well, this is
only
good.
live television channel dedicated to featuring local ideas and innovations in technology, clean energy.
We're going to have to solve this sound problem for next time because it's happened each time.
In celebration of our 15th anniversary,
I don't know why.
ThinkTech Hawaii invites you to ThinkTech United, a special holiday celebration at the downtown Laniakea YWCA. Join us on December 11th for speakers, poo-poos, awards, prizes, and surprises. And don't miss our featured speaker presentation on leadership by Robbie Alm. If you would like to network, celebrate, and have pauhana with ThinkTech Hawaii, RSVP online at thinktechhawaii.com and reserve your spot today. Mahalo for being a part of our growing audience. Let's keep ThinkTech Hawaii's mission shining bright. See you Thursday.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here on Technology Matters, playing at noon on Thursday with Avrum Goodblatt, who joins us today from Philadelphia, but soon enough, and hopefully sooner than later, he'll join us from Hawaii, from Maui or from Oahu in Hawaii, because he's en route to moving here. Anyway, he's with StratoCore, and we're talking about what social media can do for ThinkTech. And before we left, we talked about how people on the mainland, could enjoy a different kind of social experience when they engage with Hawaii. On the other hand, let me say that there are parts of that that may be veneer, you know what I mean? Because when you live on an island or on a submarine, submarines are a good example of this. Everybody's very friendly, but you still, hold some things back. And some things you do for effect. So it may not be as candid, perhaps, as you want it to be, as it would be in a mainland culture. Anyway, so what was your point?
So I'd like to give you another anecdote. I was discussing this with a colleague of mine, Susanna Opper, from Shawanon Communications. That's Shawenon. She used to live in Manhattan. Very fancy, beautiful place in Manhattan. And she and her husband moved up to the Berkshires in western Massachusetts, which is not Hawaii, but it's also a very beautiful place. Mm-hmm. And she said she noticed the same thing up there where she lives as I had mentioned about Hawaii. People who left the big city bringing their skills and knowledge with them because the quality of their life was more important to them. But they still had very capable skills, very interesting ideas. And a lot of these people are her clients. She works in communications in the sense of how to help a company prepare their plan, communicate it better, and so forth. Mm-hmm. Kind of business consulting. So the situation I'm talking about is not completely unique to Hawaii. Hawaii is just the best example of it around the country. That how do you take all these capable, smart, interesting people that Hawaii has and make use of them in terms of technology and industry, not just in tourism, but in other ways? Absolutely.
There's a great question. And I mean, it kind of assumes, I think you've stated it in so many words, that Hawaii has an advantage as a social laboratory, replete with the diversity we enjoy, replete with the cultural diversity, and also, our island social structure is a little different. But right. Given all of that, and see it from your vantage, a long way away with the skills in social media that you have and in computering in general, how do you approach creating, a laboratory that works better than any other place? How do you take social media in this context and make it better than anywhere else? How do you do? Where do you begin? What's the first step forward?
So I'm saying part of what I'm about to say tongue-in-cheek, so don't take me 100% literally.
Okay, I'll give you 80%.
But please remind me again, what is the name of an auntie in Hawaiian. What do you call your auntie?
Auntie.
You know what? Yeah.
Tutu.
But there's another name. Is it a? I'm trying to remember the name. Tutu?
Maybe.
Okay. You need different kinds of personalities, of which there are a lot in Hawaii, to keep the forum, the discussion, the project moving forward. Okay? And these are not people that have to have MBAs or great skills in computers. They have to have some understanding. And what I'm basically saying, whenever you get a group together, online or in person, you need these kind of people. Some people who can look at the larger, where is this going, how is it working? And the trouble is, they can't be people who first think, how do you quantify it? Because quantification, as critical it is to a successful business, is not the only part of the picture. There's a fellow at Stanford who talks about the different kinds of management. Management for control, management for creativity. And by creativity, I don't mean sitting around and putting your hands in the mud and doing some nice pictures for fun. I'm talking about serious creativity that creates new products, new initiatives, new companies. That kind of creativity cannot be controlled in the same way that you control the accounting department. They're both important, they're both valid, but they both need to exist in any endeavor that has creativity. How do you match those two together? Well, again, I think Hawaii has a lot of that creativity quotient. How do we share that capability of learning to manage it with other people? We need to cultivate it in Hawaii as an important skill even more than we do. It's already there. I mean, the fact that historically, Hawaii, even before it was part of the United States, its royalty encouraged music and encouraged dance. Where do we have that in the United States? And I'm not talking music and dance just as a nice, cute thing to look at. I'm not talking about, Dancing for the Stars. I don't know, did you see the one where Wozniak was on there?
No, really.
The co-founder of Apple. I don't know if it was Dancing with the Stars or some other equivalent, because I frankly don't watch those shows enough to keep track of them. But he went out there and danced with a partner and tried out. He didn't win, but I have to give him credit. He danced like a geek, but, he had courage. He went and did it. The point I'm making is that hidden part of the culture that Hawaii has had for centuries is today a key piece of what's missing in tech development. Because you can't be creative just on having enough computer programmers. There's that famous, I'm not saying anything new, I'm just putting it together in context for Hawaii. There's that famous concept that they discovered years ago of the mythical man month, that if it took 10 people 10 months to create a project, that you should be able to put 20 people on it, and then it'll take 5 months. When in fact, if you put 20 people on it, it takes 20 months. Meaning the more people you throw in there, the longer it takes.
Well, it comes back to your point about communication. It comes back to we haven't figured out how to relate to each other yet, and how to do projects. And let me add that although there's a halcyon picture that you paint about the social structure of Hawaii and how it works and all that, I mean there are also negatives to being on an island, and there are negatives to being 2,500 miles away from the mainland. There's all kind of schizophrenic view of things when you're isolated that way, and there's always a risk that your isolation will undermine your creativity. So on the one hand, yes, people in an island society can be more creative. Perhaps it's because they're removed and remote, but it's also possible that people in an island society will be oblivious to advances that are happening in the mainland. So I mean, both sides of that work together, and I guess it comes back to your original point. It's a matter of managing this creativity, harnessing it, strapping it together, creating sort of a mesh of data and thought and innovative ideas. And that's what I'm looking at. I mean, one of the things we spoke about was exactly what social media could do for an organization like ThinkTech. we do social media. We have a team of people who try to get the word out. We have a team of people who are playing with our data, trying to record it accurately and make it available for search all day long. And so data is really important for us, as it is for, I think, any company. And the question is how we could improve that, how we could take advantage of this creativity you're talking about, how we could open ourselves up to social media or use social media in a way so that we would rise on top of all the froth. Social media is in the press all the time, every day. I drove in just now and I heard a very interesting story on National Public Radio involving the former ambassador from Mexico to the U.S. and how he had no idea about social media. One day he tried Twitter and it caught him. He became a Twitter hound. He never stopped. He sent tens of thousands of messages. He was all over the place, and he understood it. He understood how it only now, plays in diplomacy, in international diplomacy, and how ambassadors can do a better job using social media than the conventional tools that diplomacy has used in the past. And I think this is a good example of how any company, whatever its current level of social media, can benefit by enhancing that social media and coming out on top. I think it's a huge competition, and you can't be oblivious, which means not only can you not do social media, but you can't stand still at your current level of social media. You always have to be advancing. So to ThinkTech now, Avrum, what is your advice?
Well, I'm going to give some advice, but I'm not sure how to fund following through on that advice, because I see the interviews that ThinkTech has produced as being an untapped vein of value that's out there on the web, but how do you make it so that it's actually used, and how do you get feedback on it? Unfortunately, you can do some things automatically, but some of it has to be done using people. People have to be going out there and looking at the videos, annotating them sufficiently so people can figure out whether they want to watch it. You might also consider doing shorter interviews, doing them 15, 20, 30 minutes at a time at a maximum, so that people can find what they want within them. I mean, even friends of mine, to get them to look through this entire interview, they have to be really good friends. Nobody has the time. So how do you take the information I'm providing? Well, for one thing, if I had been properly prepared, I would have had already on a sidebar for you a list of all the references to all the people that I mentioned, so that as I go through the talk or the interview, we can people can reference them and look at them. They may even leave the interview, but if they follow through to one of the things that I mentioned, then we've succeeded. In other words, this interview is part of a mesh of information. It has to be placed into that mesh, at least one of those meshes, in order to make it valuable. Standing alone, it's relatively worthless. And I say that with due respect for both of us. We've taken our time to do it. We've taken our time thinking about it. But right now, we're a little island. Where's the mainland? How do we connect up to it? That takes human intervention and time. You could have one person doing nothing more than taking each of the interviews, annotating them, and meshing them into the proper places on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever other, or even if all you did was connect it up to TechHui, which is its own interesting, very valuable resource. But that takes people. It cannot be done purely automatically. And people need to be paid for their work. So how are we going to fund the work necessary to do it?
This is the part I've been waiting for. This is the good part now. See if you can answer your own question, Avrum.
Yeah, exactly. How do we do the work? Well, part of it is in the presentation of who you are. And I'm like I said, I'm being a bit extreme to make a point here. I hope I'm not too rough in the way I put it. Are you just a bunch of people taking videos, or are you a group who are using videos as one of your tools to promote the development of a vibrant tech culture in Hawaii?
Okay,
Obviously, you're
I
the
think
latter.
that's a tremendous rhetorical, which we're going to deal with right after this break. That's Avrum Goodblatt of StratoCore. This is Technology Matters on the ThinkTech series. We're talking about what social media can do for ThinkTech, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevelin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday. Aloha.
Participate.
That's Avrum Goodblatt of StratoCore joining us by Skype from Philadelphia today, but he's moving to Hawaii, and soon enough we'll have him in the studio or at least on Skype from the neighbor islands. Here on Technology Matters, our show at 12 noon on Thursdays. And today we're talking about what social media can do for ThinkTech with Avrum. Avrum, the question we left hanging before the break was a rhetorical one. What can we do, or rather, let me try to put it the way I heard it. We have all these shows, and individually, the shows may not mean that much in a sort of a global context. But if they are strapped together somehow, included in a sort of intellectual mesh, then all of a sudden they take on a greater life, a greater relevance. And that's what we should be shooting for. And what I heard between the lines was that the way to create that mesh, there are a number of ways to create the mesh, but one way is through social media. Another way, as you mentioned, was to make the shows shorter and then put them into social media where more people will watch them, not only your best friends, but more people will watch them. But why don't you strap that together for me? If you were looking over ThinkTech and you wanted to make it globally attractive, have people from everywhere in the world see value, spend time on it, what would you do?
I think some of what you've already mentioned regarding improving meetings would apply here as well. We are in a virtual meeting. It's an asynchronous meeting because the people in our meeting are not with us in the room right now. Mm-hmm. But we have to imagine they're in the room. It's almost like it would be useful, and again, this is an unusual idea, that at every interview, if you pulled in 3 or 4 people just to play the part of the audience, and to be able to bring up questions, even if they're questions that we've invented, to make it more of an interaction so people can bring up what their issues are. Right now, the burden is completely on you. You're an audience of one, and you have to imagine all the different kinds of things people would say. That makes it less lively and more limited. I don't have a solution to that, but perhaps whenever there is a session, we also need to think of who are the typical kinds of audience that we're reaching for, and see if we can get someone to play the part and sit in the studio with you to help promote that kind of feeling of what they're doing. For example, to be a bit, like I said before, to be a bit tongue-in-cheek, it's reasonable for a businessman to say, this is really nice, and all you people on Maui especially, you like to have a good time in your hot tubs and going surfing. But we here in Honolulu, we're business people, and we have to make money. And how is this going to make me any money? In other words, you have to be able to respect the hard-nosed aspect as well as the creative aspect at the same time. And they have to be in your audience in the back of your mind. It's hard to do that. It's hard for me to think in 5 different ways at once. I can handle 1, maybe 2, but 5 is beyond me. Between the 2 of us, maybe we can handle 3 or 4 different ways of approaching the subject. But it's just two of us, and we have our own biases and our own approaches. So one of the things I'm thinking of is how do you broaden the participation in the video to make it more complete as a video?
Well, I have, that raises the question as it exists in radio, namely whether to take calls or not. And one way on radio to activate the conversation or increase the engagement of the conversation is to take calls and then deal with whatever questions come down the pike. On radio, I remember we were talking about computers, and some guy called in, and he said, you guys are talking about computers, but you haven't explained what electricity is. And no computer can run without electricity. So I need you to stop this noise right now and tell me about electricity. And I turned to my guests at the radio station and I said, this one's for you. Because what do you do with a question like that? And I mention the story because I think a lot of questions that you get are unformed and off the path. And if you and I we've settled on what we want to talk about here today, and if you open it up to unbridled engagement like that, you'll be distracted almost immediately, and you'll never be able to follow the pattern. Now, this may be good for the guy who asked about electricity, and it may be good for anybody who really is curious and wants to go down that road with him. But I think for most people, they'd rather not have the spectacle of two guys or whatever being distracted from what they started talking about. So there has to be a vestibule. There has to be somebody who vets this. It has to be a managed discussion, and that costs money and it costs equipment. But I agree with you. And let me make one more point, and then I'll leave you to close because we're almost out of time. We have used and will increase our use of the product I mentioned earlier, livesift.com, where we can open it up on the web with social media during the program and have people give us questions and comments using that software, using that app. And in that way, we can have that kind of engagement. We can have people test on what we say. We can have them take us where they want to go. And when the question is crazy, like what's electricity, we can ignore it. And so that's the path we're heading, just as you suggest, Avrum. But take a minute or two and please close and give a message, if you will, to our audience.
The message I'd like to give is just because it's messy and difficult to have actual productive human conversations in a business environment, it's even more necessary than it was in the past. And that we shouldn't shy away from trying to do it just because we can't have a computer do it all, and just because sometimes the resources to pay for it can be limited. It's still worth pursuing.
Okay, Avrum Goodblatt of StratoCore coming here today from Philadelphia by Skype, and soon enough he'll be here in the flesh, and hopefully we can join him on Thursdays at noon, where he can interview other people in other places using the magic power of Skype and all these principles we've been talking about in terms of structured conversation. Anyway, thank you very much, Avrum. We'll talk to you soon. Aloha and mahalo.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you. Mahalo.